Happy Friday morning and day after Thanksgiving to everybody. Welcome to the Rotowire Fantasy Football Podcast, the Friday DFS version. I am Scott Jenstad, joined as always on Friday mornings by Ryan Belongia. I get the name right this time. I'm finally nailing it. Ryan, it's week 12. I want to thank our sponsors at WynnBET for the sponsorship. That's WYNNBET. Ryan, week 12. Week 10 was so good. I kind of expected week 11 to be bad, and it was for me. I just missed on quarterbacks. It was it was a strange week where we had some real stinkers at quarterback. That Chiefs Cowboys game, 19-9, let a lot of people down. You and I talked about what's the game to stack if you don't stack that one. I think both of us liked the Bengals Raiders. That didn't work. It was Packers Vikings was the one, and we talked about that a little bit. But that game turned to be the game that if you had both sides of that, you did really well in leagues, especially because it wasn't super popular. A lot of people were on Cowboys Chiefs, and Dak and Mahomes combining for 0 touchdowns is not quite what I expected from that game.
Yeah, I know I'm in the same boat as you. Sunday went pretty bad. I think for the second time in a month, I have to come on here and say I had my worst Sunday of the year in NFL. That Bengals game, I recommended T. Higgins on here, played T. Higgins in cash. I think he caught 2 short passes on 3 targets, and that's it. Had a lot of Jeff Wilson, who became pretty popular when Elijah Mitchell was ruled out. It almost started really well for him, but Garoppolo missed him on a wide open touchdown.
Dude, he had nobody within 10 yards of him on that play.
Yeah, and then, like you mentioned, had a little bit of the Chiefs-Cowboys game, and where I didn't, I decided to go with the Bengals. They ended up playing pretty slow. The Raiders played, I don't know, it just... Yeah, everything went bad. I don't really want to think about last week. This Thanksgiving slate went better yesterday. So
good.
Building some momentum for this Sunday, and hopefully we can turn it around.
Did you play a lot of tight ends? Because there were 8 tight end touchdowns yesterday. It was crazy.
So yeah, that was part of it. Yeah, I played a lot of tight ends, and none of them were Darren Waller.
That's key. It's wild. I think there were 7. It was 7 or 8 touchdowns from tight ends. And Waller was not one that scored. It was a weird, wacky day. But let's get on to the week 12 Sunday main slate. Obviously, the 3 Thanksgiving games we won't be talking about. And then we got Sunday Night Football. We have Cleveland at Baltimore. Monday Night Football. We have Seattle at Washington. So 2 games that aside from losing maybe Lamar, don't really disappoint me too much not on the main slate. But another week where we don't have a lot of high totals, we have a lot of low totals. I think it's clearly a theme in the NFL now. Teams are scoring a little bit less. It's an interesting week. We have 1 game that's over a 5-point spread. I bet on games. I've done this for a lot of years where I look at spreads and stuff. I only have ever seen a week where there's no team favored by more than a touchdown, and there's 1 team favored by more than 5, and that's New England's at 6.5 over Tennessee, and that's because the injuries on the Titans. But a wild week, and even that game, you're not New England's going to easily win that. There's no worry about blowouts. They're going to happen, but there's not any games we're walking into this is going to be 21-0 at halftime. They're just not worried about that. On the high total side, I'm going to dip down a little bit lower than normal just because there's not many down there. I'm going to start at 48. We have the Chargers in Denver at 48, Minnesota, San Francisco at 49. Tampa Bay at Indy is the 1 game over 50 on the slate. It's 52.5. Obviously, the high flying Tampa offense, and against Jonathan Taylor, who's been scoring 4 or 5 touchdowns a game himself. So, on this top end, is there a game you really like to stack? Is there a game that on the high totals that you don't like? Where do you feel kind of fall on these handful of high total games?
Yeah, I think the Tampa Bay Indy game will probably be the most popular, and rightfully so when people see that total. There's a lot of bad games on this slate. I can't remember a slate with this many games that don't look good at all. I mean, Jets, Texans, Titans, Patriots, Falcons, Jaguars, Panthers, Dolphins with the lowest total on the slate.
Yep.
Eagles, Giants. I mean, so yeah, like you mentioned, those 3 afternoon games will be targets after the Buccaneers Colts game. And I think you can make good arguments against all of those games. The Rams Packers game. So I was surprised to see that game have a 47-point total the last I checked.
I was too. I thought that'd be a popular game. I think it still will be. I kind of like the over in that game too, though.
Yeah, so I think it opened around 48.5 and it's down to 47 last I checked. They played in the playoffs last year. And even though the game had 50 points, it had a below average number of plays, and the Packers this season just insist on playing slow. They're always under when it comes to total plays, but there are paths, for that game to be better. Like if the Rams take an early lead, the Packers will have to pass, similar to last week against the Vikings. So I do like that game if it starts a certain way. Chargers, Broncos. I think the Broncos are actually the slowest team in the league, but the Chargers are a pretty fast team. And, if they get out to a lead, again, the Broncos won't really have much of a choice but to try to play catch up. So I kind of like that game too. And then I know people like this Vikings Niners game too. And I know you're a Niners fan. Maybe you can help us more with that one, but I don't know, the Niners, they like to get a lead and run the ball and sit on it. The Vikings, they're kind of okay with that too, if they get a lead. So I'm kind of worried about that game too. It's a weird slate. Yeah, I think it's the first time we've seen a lot of slates this year with multiple games with 15-point spreads. Everything's close, which is nice, but there's just not a lot of places you want to go. What do you think? Is any of those games stand out to you?
Not really. As I went back and forth, I think the Rams and Packers is probably the one that there's just so many good players in that game that'll probably end up going there. But you look at, you mentioned Green Bay playing slow. They're also allowing the fifth fewest points per game in the league too. So it's funny that you talk about that game and everybody thinks the Rams defense is this and that, but the Rams defense has been pretty average all year. They're middle of the pack in a lot of categories. They're, if you look a little deeper, they're probably a little better than some of their stats lay out. Of course, they have good players, but they're 15th in points allowed per game. There's a couple other stats. I think passing yards per game, they're 18th. There's a lot of stats that are just kind of in the middle. And I think, a lot of that is just kind of reputation. And you think they're going to turn it on at some point, but they've not been great. They've allowed a lot of long drives. And but you're right. The Packers play slow. And there's no game that I'm looking at, I'm like, oh, this is the game I want to attack. I think the games you mentioned, I will have some pieces of all of them. Obviously Tampa, Indy is interesting to try and figure out how to play that game. Because if you you look at Indy, you're like, well, Jonathan Taylor, and then you look at Tampa, and they stop the run almost better than anybody in the league. So it's a weird one where you can't last week, even Indy against Buffalo, Jonathan Taylor was like, well, it's Buffalo's defense, and obviously he went absolutely bonkers. So it's an interesting week as we get through the players. I think there's a lot of players I like, but maybe not games that I'm attacking quite that much. You mentioned all the low totals. I think you hit all those. Pittsburgh and Cincy is also 45. There are it's a weird week where some of the bad teams are playing each other. Some slow teams are playing each other. You got Jacksonville, Atlanta. You mentioned Carolina, Miami, the Jets and Houston. There's some ugly games out there, but that's what we're here for, is to find the right plays in these games. They still, all the contests still pay the same, whether the games are good or not. And we'll be watching whether the matchups are highly anticipated or not. But you're right that the afternoon slate is definitely the better one with the Green Bay Packers game, or the Green Bay Rams game, and the Niners Vikings game are both pretty watchable games. Mm-hmm. So let's jump into who you think is going to be kind of the popular plays this week. Starting at we'll start at the top. We'll start at quarterback. As I looked at quarterback, I saw two kind of mid-range / expensive guys I think will be popular in Tom Brady and Jalen Hurts, and then one cheap guy in Cam Newton. I missed on Cam last week. I did not want to play him. I did not see it. He had 26 points. He was the QB4. He had 180 yards passing, but 2 touchdowns, 46 yards rushing, another rushing touchdown. Miami D's been better the last month, but I don't think we're scared of them. But who do these popular quarterbacks? Do you think those three are kind of the ones, or are there some other guys you think are going to be kind of up that rostership percentage?
Yeah. So the first thing, just in general, this slate for cash games and at quarterback, there's not the obvious options that we've had in recent weeks. We've had them at quarterback, running back, receiver. There's kind of not really anyone at any of the positions, save for maybe a couple of the expensive guys. But yeah, starting at quarterback, the 3 guys you mentioned, I think people will play Hurts over Brady. I think just because of the rushing upside and because he's $300 cheaper. Like you, I wasn't on Newton. I guess I'm just not really a Cam guy, but it makes sense. It's a cheap price tag, and paying down at quarterback makes sense too. If we don't end up with value at other positions, there's a lot of guys to spend for. So I can see paying down There's a guy in the middle though that I'm considering. Justin Herbert, 6,600.
I never heard of him. Who are you talking about?
Yeah, I know you like Herbert too. I'm a big fan as well, and his salary is now, I mean, cheaper than it's been in a while. He was 6,700 against Pittsburgh, but that was a showdown slate. Other than that, he's been over 7K for more than the past month. I get why the price tags come down for a matchup against the Broncos, but that's not really prohibitive for me. I mean, the Broncos, yeah, they play slower, but the Chargers are a better team. So I'd still expect plenty of chances to score. So I don't mind going to Herbert. But yeah, I think after that, you probably just pay down and play Cam. I've heard some people mentioning Tyrod Taylor. He's another quarterback that runs, and it's such a good matchup against the Jets. Yeah. So I mean, yeah, you can go there. I guess I wouldn't have a problem with that. What about you? Who are you leaning towards? I guess at the top and the bottom, or just in general?
Yeah, a lot of Herbert. When we talk stacks, I'll get to that. But I just love the price tag on him. 6,600. He went crazy last week. The 90 yards rushing was out of nowhere. I don't think he's been over like 30 yards all year. He had 90 yards, but he had like 385, 4 touchdowns. The game script worked out. It was kind of back and forth in that game. It was a fun game. But yeah, I love Herbert at the price. That's kind of a price tag thing for me. But the easy one I would talk about is Jalen Hurts. He's 7,300. The stat has been everywhere this week that he has 10 weeks where he has been a QB1 in fantasy. No one else has more than 7. It's a pretty wild stat. Like someone broke it down. You had 10, and the 9 and 8 are empty, and then 7. I mean, he's played 11 games. He has 10 QB1 weeks. It's that one week where they ran the ball 1,000 times where he didn't get there. But it's weird because he hasn't topped 180 yards passing since week 7. But he has 50-plus rushing yards each of the last 5 weeks. He had the 3 rush touchdowns last week. Like they're running, and he's running as a result also. And it's working. It's kind of scary to look at, though. You look at it, you're like, he just doesn't get a lot of passing yards. Doesn't have the weapons you really want in a quarterback. But the rushing upside has just been so big that it's been carrying him. He gets there almost every week. Yeah, and it's a guy. It's like it's hard for me. I've had a tough time rostering Hurts lately. Just I don't like the passing. The passing upside, I guess. And I want to say, I feel like he's been a bit fortunate to get there on a lot of weeks. I don't want to say like he's been lucky, right? But I mean, he really relies on rushing touchdowns. Yep. Yeah, like you said, he hasn't gone over 178 passing yards in 4 straight weeks. And now he's up to 7-3. Look, I get it. If you want to play Hurts against the Giants, I probably won't go there. I'm not the Jalen Hurts guy, but it makes sense. I mean, like you said, he just smashes every week. And I love quarterbacks with rushing upside. I mean, I don't know. Do you lean one way or the other? What do you think? Yeah, if I'm going to go with that price tag, I'd go Brady at 7,600 and just kind of figure out who to play at receiver there. You got between Godwin and Evans. We'll talk about I keep saying Patriots. We'll talk about the Buccaneers when we hit stacks. But I think I'd go Brady. I think I even might go Stafford in that price range, and Rodgers at 6,900. I think there's just enough guys around him that I'm looking for big passing games. I just worry with Hurts. Like, props to him. He does get there. I worry a little bit though that you're really counting on 60 rushing yards and a touchdown to get there, because 180 passing yards in 4 straight weeks is just it's rough to look at. But we'll talk about quarterbacks a little bit more, get more stacks, and we'll kind of get some more guys. But I think the cheap guy is going to have to be Newton for people. I think people might jump into the Jimmy G waters a little bit, but they just run the ball so much that it's hard to count on that. Like if they do get a lead, who knows? That game from Minnesota should be close, but if they do get a lead, like they're just going to hand the ball off the entire second half. And they're a team that absolutely will do that. Whereas look at someone like Tampa, if they get a lead, like Brady's still throwing some passes and mixing it around. He has so many weapons too. But so running back's interesting too. We're gonna talk about a bunch of like the expensive guys that aren't gonna be popular here in a bit. But at the top, I think there's 2 guys who are probably the most popular. It's Jonathan Taylor and Christian McCaffrey. Jonathan Taylor's 9,100. Christian McCaffrey's 9,000. We kind of hit on Taylor with the big game against the Bills already. McCaffrey is back to full snaps last week. He had a couple weeks where he got the ball a lot but didn't play the fourth quarter because they were getting blown out. Last week he had 17 touches, 10 rushes, 7 catches, had a touchdown. 18 targets the last 2 weeks. Miami is kind of league average against the run, so no matchup worries here. If you're going one of these guys at the top, the two studs here, do you have a strong preference between the two? Or are you avoiding this range completely? Where do you fall in between these two guys?
Okay. Yeah, I do have a preference. So last week, not only did I roster all the wrong players, but I also recommended fading Jonathan Taylor. I was worried about the Bills matchup a little bit, and I was worried that they might be playing from behind. And obviously, none of that mattered as he went for 5 touchdowns, and I think the biggest game anyone's had in fantasy all season. So
and they play from ahead the whole game. Like, it's just one of those things. It was hard. I mean, they completely shut down the Bills, and it was a hard game script to get to. Although the Colts are going to use Taylor either way, though.
So then this week, I was prepared to jump on board for Taylor. But I see that he's gotten an $800 salary increase now up to $9,100.
Yep.
Don't love that he's priced the same as McCaffrey, but you look at his game log and it's absolutely valid. I mean, he's put up over 21 fantasy points in 8 consecutive weeks. That's crazy. So I was thinking about jumping on board even against Tampa's tough run defense, but then I see that Tampa's getting Vita Vea back. Bruce Arians said Vita Vea is good to go. He is arguably the top run stuffer in the league.
Yep.
And Tampa Bay is favored. So I think when you put all that together, I'm going to fade Taylor again. And it's not just to fade Taylor, it's to play McCaffrey. I want to roster McCaffrey. He's looked great. I mean, he's averaged over 6.5 yards a carry in his two full games. Not counting the New England game where he just kind of came back, and 18 targets. Cam likes to look for him, likes to dump it off to him. I side with McCaffrey. What about you?
I do too, and I love Jonathan Taylor. If you look at my draft teams, I have a lot of Jonathan Taylor, and that's been great. But I just think you have to look at this week by week. You have to look at this just one game at a time. And I love Jonathan Taylor, but going against Tampa at the same price as McCaffrey, I just have to go. If I play one of the top two guys, and we're going to talk about some kind of elite guys in the next tier when we talk about running backs for tournaments. I just think that McCaffrey is my guy there. The Taylor, you mentioned the Taylor run of 8 weeks, it's nuts. He's the 4th player ever in the history of the NFL to have 100+ yards, total yards, and a touchdown in 8 straight games. We're talking historical stuff. It's the first time since LT did it in 2000, whatever that was. But it's crazy. He's been awesome. He is awesome. But I just think that the matchup dictates here that I would go if I'm playing a top guy at 9,000, it's McCaffrey for me too.
Yeah, me too. I mean, matchup and price, and then if Taylor's going to get some rostership just based on what he's done. If you were going to tell me that no one was going to roster him, maybe I'd consider it a little bit more. But yeah, just altogether makes me lean McCaffrey.
Yeah, when you score 5 touchdowns, people are going to play you the next week, no matter who you're facing. So I don't think that'll be a problem. We're going to get to mid-range running backs and cheap guys in a bit here, but I want to talk about expensive receivers, kind of in the popularity range. There's 2 guys who stick out at the top. Cooper Kupp is 9,600 this week. I was stunned to see that price. And Devontae Adams in the same game is 8,600. What do you think people do with this one? Kupp is so expensive. It seems to me if everybody's going to go up to this range, they're going to play Adams for $1,000 less. But am I wrong there?
No, I think you're spot on. Couldn't imagine seeing a receiver priced $1,000 more than Adams at the start of the season, especially one in the same game. Look, Cooper Kupp, similar to what Jonathan Taylor's done at running back, Kupp is doing at receiver.
Yep.
If they were the same price, I'd roster Kupp, but for $1,000 less, I got to go with Adams. And I think the majority of people will do that, which is the case for playing Kupp. A lot of times, not just in NFL, but in DFS for all sports, when a player, is sort of egregiously priced like that, or not even egregiously, just a very high price. Sometimes, it makes sense to go out of your way to try to roster them. So I understand it, but, I'm a Packer fan too. So I just have to go with Devontae Adams in that game if I'm going to play one of them.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, I mean, Adams is so good. I mean, you look at Kupp, 13 targets each of the last 2 weeks. And, even when the Rams offense have been struggling these last couple weeks, they lost both those games to the Titans and the 49ers, and he still went crazy in both those games. So they're just like, Stafford uses him so much. He's been under double-digit targets once all year, and that was 9 in week 8. So it's not like it was a down game. Justin Jefferson, Adam Thielen just smoked this Packers secondary last week too. 16 catches for 251 yards and 2 touchdowns. So I get it, but it would have to be, for me, it'd have to be with a Stafford play. I think it'd have to be as part of a stack. I'm not playing Kupp by himself at 9600. It's just too hard to get there with other stuff I want to do in the lineup. And you just drop 1,000 to Adams, who had 7 for 115 and 2 touchdowns last week. 6+ catches each of the last 4 weeks. Super involved. The Rams are actually 30th in the NFL in points per game to wide receiver 1. So it's not like the Rams defense. They don't shadow Jalen Ramsey with guys. They didn't in the playoffs last year. You referenced that playoff game last year. They did not have Ramsey shadow Adams. I mean, he ends up on him sometimes, but it's not like he's going to follow him around. And, Deebo Samuel had 30 points last weekend or 2 weeks ago against the Rams, but the Rams were on bye last week. But I know some of that was rushing, but still, they're just giving up a lot of big games. And I think you get Devontae Adams $1,000 cheaper than anybody. I'm probably going to go Devontae every time and be pretty happy with it.
Yep. Totally agree. I've heard, people sometimes get worried about rostering a number 1 receiver against Jalen Ramsey, but like you said, he hasn't been shadowing. And in the playoff game last season, Adams had not a great game, but he had 9 for 66 and a touchdown. And it would have had a better game, but they ran the ball a lot in the second half with the lead. So yeah, the matchup is against the Rams is not prohibitive for Adams.
There are a lot of mid-range receivers. We're going to talk about them in a little bit here too, but there's one tight end I want to talk about that I think is going to be insanely popular. It's Rob Gronkowski at Indy. They're playing the Colts there, 4,400 in a game, the highest total in a game with Tom Brady, in a game where you're going to be looking to get pieces of this game. I think Gronk is going to be easily the most popular tight end at 4,400. He's played 4 games this year, really. Like if you look at like one game, he played like 6 snaps, but he played 4 games really. He had 8 targets in 3 of those 4 games. Like when he's out there, Brady looks at him. Last week he was 6 for 71 and 8 targets. Big game total, great price, big name quarterback. I don't see how Gronk is the most popular tight end this week.
Yeah, I agree with you. Well,
like he should be like 5,300 or something like that.
I agree. Okay, I don't know if he'll be the most popular, just because people just don't like to roster Gronk. Like last year, coming off the injury, and he just didn't look great. People didn't like to roster him. They didn't roster him in the Super Bowl. They don't roster him on these showdown slates where he's went off, coming off the injuries this year. But you're right. Like Brady just loves him. And without AB, that's a boost to Gronk. Definitely.
That's a key to me. Without AB, like everything opens up for everybody else there. It's just, you go from 4 main targets to 3. It just changes everything for everybody.
Yeah. And I agree with you that I think he should be popular, but I'm looking at some projections and he's not really. Now he will get rostership because that's in, he's playing in the highest total game, a game that people want to attack. But there's other tight ends that people are going to roster too. So I don't think like Gronk will be crazy popular.
All right, good. I hope not, because I plan on playing him a lot. I'd like to see him not crazy popular. Let's get into some stacks here, but first a note from our sponsors at WynnBET. There's one thing we appreciate here at Rotowire. It's making good decisions, and even more so making the right decision. Listen up. I have an incredible offer for you with Rotowire's newest partner, WynnBET, the premier digital casino and sportsbook app. WynnBET is now the exclusive sponsor for Rotowire's Fantasy Podcast. WynnBET brings you all the latest action with a user-friendly interface, moneyline bets, boosted parlays, over-unders, round robins, live betting, and so much more, all at your fingertips. Want to break from sports betting? Head into WynnBET's digital casino and take a spin on roulette, double down on blackjack, slam the slots, or try your hand at baccarat. WynnBET is currently available in 6 states: Colorado, Indiana, Michigan, New Jersey, Tennessee, Virginia, all while rapidly expanding. At WynnBET, the possibilities are limitless. WynnBET is currently offering all RotoWire listeners a risk-free bet up to $500 on your first wager. Download WynnBET now. That's WynnBET. WynnBET, the exclusive partner for RotoWire's Fantasy Podcasts. So Ryan, let's talk about some quarterback receiver stacks. We've kind of hit on the top game is Tampa and Indy in terms of over/under total. I think a lot of people will go Brady stacks. The thing that'll help differentiate that is he's got 2 receivers. He has Mike Evans at 7,200. Chris Godwin at 7,000. You can talk all day about which one you like more. I think, Evans is the touchdown guy. Godwin's the receptions and targets guy. And I think that's kind of fair. I like both of them with the fact that AB is not playing. And when AB plays, I think it gets really muddled up, like we mentioned a second ago. I think the Brady stack with a receiver and Gronkowski will be the way I go in some lineups too. I think that's very playable too. Do you think Indy scores enough to make this kind of a back and forth game? I guess is what I'm wondering. Do you think it's I know that it's not a huge spread, and I know a lot of people are picking Indy. I think it's like a 3-point spread. I think a lot of people are picking Indy because they've been playing so well. They're on this win streak. But do you think Indy's built the way that we want for like a 35-31 type shootout?
Yeah, I mean, probably not. I mean, we've seen Wentz struggle in those type of games. He hasn't had to do much recently with them leaning on the run so much. But yeah, I mean, I think they can. Look, the Bucs haven't been all that impressive either. They've actually been pretty disappointing. I know they crushed the Giants in that primetime game the other night. But a lot of teams crush the Giants. And
True.
Tampa, the way to attack Tampa is with the passing game. And we know Wentz is capable. So yeah, I think they can. But I guess if you stack Tampa, I don't think you need to run it back. Like, I'm not going to run it back with Jonathan Taylor because, he's the most expensive running back.
Yeah.
Brady's the most expensive quarterback. Tampa's receivers are expensive. So that doesn't really make sense. So I don't mind just stacking Tampa, but I also don't mind running it back with like a Pittman. Pittman is cheaper than we've seen him recently. So that makes sense too. I don't know, but it sounded like maybe you don't think the Colts can hang around, or how do you feel?
The key is with the Bucs, though, is I don't know how much it matters. I mean, Brady likes to throw in the second half when they have leads. I don't think I worry about that much. But if they get up 35-3, sure. But I think the Colts do enough. It's just you just don't picture them in a 35-31 game. But sometimes, you mentioned you got to attack Tampa through the air, and it'll be interesting to see if they can run. It'll be a fascinating game to watch because watching Jonathan Taylor against Vita Vea and the rest of the Bucs defense will be fun. But I just don't think it matters. I think that my question was more for a comeback kind of thing. You kind of answered that. I think I would go Pittman if I do it. But I don't think it's crazy if you just take the Tampa stack and find other places that you want to put your other roster spots on. But it's gonna be a fun game. I think that I think it's a very good way to go. It's the highest total game, pretty obvious there. But you mentioned Justin Herbert. He's 6,600. If you're going to stack this game, so it's interesting. We've had the back and forth with these Chargers receivers, Allen and Mike Williams, Keenan Allen, Mike Williams. Keenan Allen is now 1,700 more than Mike Williams this week. It's wild how it started that way, and then Williams is getting there, and I think at one point he got higher than Allen, and we started playing Allen. Allen's been a target monster the last 4 weeks, 11, 13, 11, 11. He's over 75 yards in each game, 35 catches the last 4 weeks. He's been huge. Mike Williams is quiet, finally played well last week. He had 5 for 97 on 6 targets. Obviously, the huge Justin Herbert game helped there, 382 and 3 touchdowns passing. So what are you doing? You mentioned Herbert earlier. If you're stacking this game, do you pay up for Allen? Are you paying down for Williams at the cheaper price? How do you kind of feel you'll attack this game?
Yeah, that's a good question. I do want to attack this game. I like Herbert. This is one of the stacks that I'm strongly considering. If all things were equal, it'd just be Keenan Allen. Those targets are crazy.
Yeah.
11, 11, 13, and 13. And also the Broncos struggle against slot receivers and are decent on the outside. That being said, 5,700 for Mike Williams is very appealing.
It's a huge difference is the key.
It's a huge difference. And yeah, I think you can make the case. You can make the case for either guy. I don't know. I guess it depends. If I get some value at other positions that I like, that makes paying up for Keenan, I guess, more affordable or easier. If there's not value, no, I have no problem going with Mike Williams. In situation, just in general, I kind of like to just go with the guy who's significantly cheaper when they have similar upside. We know what Mike Williams can do. He has big time ceiling potential. So I guess if I'm making one lineup just right now, give me Mike Williams. I'll take the chance for $1,700 difference. Yeah. What about you?
Yeah, I feel the same way. I mean, I think that I'll look at it and kind of see where the value is, but I think that 1,700 and getting a receiver in the same game with my quarterback is probably the way I go. I love Keenan Allen, but if I look at, I can go Williams and like one of these like expensive receivers that nobody's going to have. That's kind of a one-off that I do like to play expensive one-offs like that. So I think I'll probably get there. But as we talk cheaper guys here, there's a lot of mid-range running backs. We talked about the expensive ones, but there's a lot of mid-range guys this week too. So there is some value to be had here. So as I build it, I love Keenan Allen, but I think I'd probably lean Williams if I had to answer it kind of in a one lineup kind of thing. Rams Packers, talking about this game in terms of stacks. Are you thinking about Rodgers Devontae coming back with someone? Are you thinking about Stafford Kupp coming back with someone? How do you kind of feel about this game in terms of really stacking it? It's a really expensive one to do though.
Right, and you just said it. It's really expensive. So yeah, I've been thinking about taking a shot on it, but if I stack this game, I want to play Cooper Kupp. I mean, especially if I stack the Rams side.
Right.
So,
and then it's hard. You want to play Devontae too. So it's I mess with some Kupp Devontae lineups and it gets gross pretty quickly.
Yeah. So they really, I mean, both of them have to just go off if they're in the same lineup. I mean, you need at those salaries, you need 25 plus from each of them probably. That's tough. So yeah, I want to do it, but I think the salaries are going to keep me off that. I could go with the Packers side, maybe Rodgers, Adams, and you could run it back with maybe Darrell Henderson, maybe Van Jefferson, and I'm not an Odell guy, but I get it for $5K. That he didn't know the offense last week. He should be more involved this week. So I could see myself with a little Packers stack running it back with one of the cheaper Rams, but I think it's really hard to play, one of the more expensive quarterbacks with both of the most expensive receivers. Yeah, it's just you really need them to go off. And then the total, I couldn't believe this total wasn't 50.
Yeah.
And that just leads me to believe that there's not going to be as many plays as you usually need. So yeah, I don't know. I'm kind of leaning away from this one. What about you?
Are you concerned with Stafford at all with the last couple games? I'm not really. I just think they got a bye week this week. They probably figured some stuff out. The Niners game just got weird pretty quickly. The Niners, ran the ball so much, but I'm not that worried. I think I agree with you. I think if I do it, I will go Stafford Kupp with a cheap Packers receiver. Or you can come back with AJ Dillon if you wanted to also. That's assuming Aaron Jones doesn't play. Obviously, he's questionable at the moment. Practiced earlier in the week. We'll talk about that in a second. Or Rodgers, Devontae, and then a cheaper, like you mentioned, a cheaper Rams option. Henderson, maybe Tyler Higbee, but I don't love that. I'd play Gronk over Higbee every time, and then probably come back. You mentioned Van Jefferson. I do like that one too. So I think the key for me with that stack is you kind of already said it would be, one of the expensive receivers and a cheaper option on the other side. Are there any others? Those are like kind of the main ones I was looking at. Are there any like sneaky stacks you like? Any like quarterback receiver combos that maybe off the radar that you think you might slide some lineups this week?
Yeah. So if you eliminate those afternoon games and the Tampa game, there's pretty much nothing else. So anything we recommend is a stretch, and it's coming from a game that is not appealing. I can make a few cases. So if you're ever gonna play Jacksonville, today or Sunday might be a time, because you could argue that no team has looked worse than the Falcons recently, and then Agnew is now out, so it makes it clearer for who the Jags options are, and they should also see a few more targets. And
are you doing it? Are you doing it?
Honestly, I might, because the salaries are so appealing. They don't need to do much. Like, you can make a good case for Marvin Jones. You can make a good case for Dan Arnold again, and this guy.
Here's the one.
Chenault. I mean, I got to say it now that he is the slot guy without Agnew there. And I don't know. So like I said, these are stretches anywhere else we're going to go. But I mean, yeah, I don't know. Tell me one of these bad games that you might stack, I guess. Or yeah.
So interesting on Chenault. I don't know if you saw, there was a quote from Urban Meyer this morning saying he's been looking at stuff and he wants to get Chenault more touches in the run game. So, we talk about a lot of this stuff is like coach speak and all that, but I don't know, mildly interesting there that at least they're realizing that he's a talented guy. They want him to get in the ball. No Jamal Agnew is big for him. Man, it's going to take a lot to stomach.
So maybe we're going to see a Deebo Samuel-esque game from Laviska Shenault if he gets involved in the running game.
Now that you've entered complete dreamland, maybe, but yeah. There's not a lot of other stacks I like. I think that if I were going to do one, it would probably be Kirk Cousins with Justin Jefferson. I do think the Niners defense is playing well. They run a lot of clock, but their secondary is still the weak point. I know Josh Norman and Emmanuel Mosley have been better at cornerback than they have been, and Jaquaski Tart and Jimmy Ward have been better at safety. But I still think that they can't guard Jefferson. I think that Cousins, 6,300 is a pretty decent price. He's not super cheap, but cheap enough that he just kind of always finds a way to get some stats. And I think that if I'm Minnesota, I'm attacking this game through the air. I know they have Dalvin Cook, but I'm still attacking this game through the air. I still think the Niners secondary is the weak spot there. So that's probably the one I would go with if I'm away from the afternoon and Tampa games. I think for me, it probably because I guess it's an afternoon game also, but Cousins Jefferson would be the one that I'm probably looking at that maybe a little bit off the radar.
Yeah, I don't mind that either. Another cheap one, like again, these are tough to recommend, but like a Tyrod Taylor Cook stack isn't the worst thing. It's such a good matchup, and it's cheap, and you can run it back with cheap Jets. So again, you don't need those stacks to do that much. Yeah. But yeah, kind of, Cam and McCaffrey. I don't know, Cam and DJ Moore. That game has the lowest total. Like we've talked about Tua a bit recently. Waddle and Gesicki are still in good spots with Miami being without Parker and Fuller still, but 42 total. That's tough. So yeah, there's not much else besides, the afternoon games that we mentioned.
Yeah, I think those lower games are, for me, it's like finding one-offs. I don't think I'm stacking any of those games and hoping for something crazy there. But let's talk about we talked about McCaffrey and whoever it was. Jonathan Taylor earlier is kind of the expensive ones. In terms of the expensive running backs that are in that, a little bit underneath that range, but, above the mid-range. We have Austin Eckler, 8,400, Dalvin Cook, 8,100, Joe Mixon off the big game last week, 7,500. Do you find yourself going to any of these three guys? Eckler scored 4 times this week too. Lost a little bit in the Jonathan Taylor chaos, but Dalvin Cook is obviously really talented against the 49ers. He's been it's a tougher matchup. The Niners have been tough against the run, 3.8 yards per carry. Cook himself's been under 4 yards per carry the last couple weeks. So any of these three guys that you find yourself clicking and putting in your roster?
I don't think so. Like you said, Cook. So Cook, I don't want to roster a running back versus the Niners. Eckler, like Eckler a lot. The salary went way up. So I guess, just if you without salary considered, it would be Eckler. And then Harrison Mixon. I don't know. I'm not sure what to think about that matchup. The Steelers historically, and even at the start of this season, have a good defense and a good run defense, but not so much recently. Mixon's also the cheapest there. Also Cincinnati, we wanted to stack them last week, or we did stack them not last week, but they went back to the run. At the start of the season, they really favored the run, playing a little bit slower, trying to eliminate Burrow's mistakes, just not having him throw the ball around like he was sort of in the middle of the season. So, I can get behind Mixon. I guess I like that Mixon's cheaper than the rest, and I like that he's playing for a favorite. But yeah, if I'm in this 8K range, I'm just going to find the salary and get up to McCaffrey. What about you? What do you think about that range?
Kind of my answer too. I think I go up to McCaffrey. There's a lot of mid-range guys I do like this week, so I don't think I'm going to find myself here. Mixing with 30 carries last week was wild. I just you're right. I think they were trying to limit Burrow's mistakes. I didn't think Burrow looked good last week. I love Joe Burrow, but I didn't think he looked good at all last week. I watched a bunch of that game since we did have it stacked, and it was not great to watch. But the funny thing is, I didn't have any of those three guys bolded. But then as I look at the expensive receivers, we talked about Kupp and Adams. I really like this group right here of three. I like Justin Jefferson, 8,300. We talked about him a little bit. Debo, 7,900. Debo had 79 yards rushing last week. He only had one catch, but he had 79 yards rushing and a touchdown there. So he got there. If he's going to run the ball 8 times, like that creates a nice floor there that, even if the Niners don't pass a lot, at least he's catching the ball a ton. The targets have gone down with Ayuk kind of back out of the doghouse and George Kittle back off the IR. And then Jamar Chase is 7,300. I do like going back to him. Has not topped 50 yards the last 3 games. It's very clear since that 200-yard game, it just hasn't been the same. But still 28 targets in those 3 games. I think he's really talented. He's a guy that they take deep shots with. Sometimes you're not going to get there because those aren't going to connect. You're going to see the targets without the catches. He had 2 touchdowns against Pittsburgh in week 3 of that game, kind of his breakout game. The Steelers have struggled against deep passes this year. I like all 3 of these guys. I'm going to look to, as I build lineups, I really like the expensive receiver one-off this week. I think Jefferson, Samuel, and Jamar Chase are all going to kind of find some ways in my lineups this week.
Yeah, I like all those guys too. First one that stood out to me was Debo. You're right. You don't love that Ayuk and Kittle are back seeing targets, but you do love the 8 carries for 79 yards last week, and it wasn't like a fluke. He had 5 carries for 36 yards and a touchdown the week before. And
it's very clear they will get the ball in his hands at some point in the game. They force it no matter what. Yeah,
and he has so many long to longish touchdowns this year. He's the type of player that can score anytime he touches it. Really like that. Jefferson, San Fran's a matchup that I usually look to avoid. You mentioned some things going in Jefferson's favor. I love Jefferson as a player. I'm worried that the Niners just run the ball a lot. The 8-3 is like a big price tag to have to pay off. I mean, of course he can do it. Jefferson, crazy games the last 2 games, 169 yards, 143 yards. Yeah, I understand. I get that. I probably lean Debo in that game. And then Chase, I'm not sure what I think about Chase because I probably rather just play Allen for the same salary.
Yeah.
You mentioned looking Burrow last week, and we both stacked Cincy. I mean, it was evident early in the first quarter that stack was going to fail.
Yeah.
I mean,
it's one of those what you're like, oh, it'll get there. And I was like, I knew early on, I was like, oh, this is not getting there.
Right when the game started, you could tell. Now Chase, you're right. The deep threat, makes him viable always because he can just catch a couple passes to get there. So yeah, I can see myself rostering Chase.
And in a tournament, like Mike Evans and Chris Godwin are right there in price. Allen and Debo are above him. I think Chase gets lost this week. I don't think people are going to be no one's going to be stacking Cincy, so a lot of people are going to be stacking Tampa. And if you do that, you have to do it with the receivers. If people are going to stack the Rams or Green Bay, you got to do that one of the expensive receivers. I just think Chase is super overlooked this week. And if you're going to give me an explosive big play guy at 5% owned, I just like that a lot this week.
That is the best point of all. Yep. And I think you're absolutely right. People will go to Keenan. People will go to Tampa Bay, or they'll go all the way up. Yeah. An overlooked Chase. Yeah. That's good point. That's the reason to roster him.
And you got to think people are going to play Devontae at that price. It's just hard to get that second expensive receiver in. If you want to play McCaffrey or Taylor, there's no way to do it. So I just think there's a lot of builds that kind of skip this range. Stacks will skip him. Builds will skip this range. I think he comes in really cheap and are really low rostered, which you always like with a stud receiver. So let's talk about some mid-range guys though. But first, a note from our sponsors at Yahoo. The new NFL season is underway, and Yahoo's excited to kick off daily fantasy football. There'll be a ton of big prize contests throughout the season on Yahoo, including our multi-entry contest now being shark-free. To celebrate the football season and Yahoo Daily Fantasy becoming shark-free, Yahoo is giving all users the opportunity to claim a free $10 in contest entry credit. Users can take advantage of the free $10 entry credit to join one of Yahoo's biggest contests. In addition to the free credit, Yahoo has a $1 million NFL DFS contest live. The $1 million contest features $1 million in total prizes, including first place receiving $100,000 and entry into the first ever Yahoo Fantasy Football Championship live event, which will occur at the MGM National Harbor in Maryland this December. Play Yahoo Daily Fantasy Football on Yahoo this season. Visit sports.yahoo.com/dailyfantasy/welcome to claim the free $10 offer to get started. So in terms of, let's start with mid-range running backs. There's a lot of guys. I guess I would call it I'm going to call it the $4,600 because there's someone cheaper to, $6,500 range. We've got Cordell Patterson sounds like he's going to be back. Nice matchup against the Jaguars, 6,500. James Robinson in that same game, got on the other side, 6,200 against Atlanta. Between these two guys in the sixes, you have a strong preference here. What do you think about the mid-range running backs overall?
Yeah, I like a few of them.
I do too.
But my preference is probably Robinson. I like Patterson too, though. It's a good matchup for both. So the thing about Robinson, he's been in negative game scripts the last few weeks, where the Jags get down big and then they sort of abandon the run. Yeah. He's also been banged up for a little while now, and despite all that, still has 7 touchdowns in his last 7 games. And I mentioned with the Jags that Agnew being out, it's just something that's just a little thing, but it still could be 2 more targets for Robinson, who's, already active in the passing game. And then the matchup against Atlanta, like, I want to target Atlanta. I can't believe how bad they've looked. So yeah,
I don't think they have a touchdown in the last 2 weeks.
Yeah, you're right. It's just unbelievable. I think they've been outscored 68-3. So like, it's rare that we find a favorable spot for Jacksonville. So yeah. I guess I kind of want to take a chance on that when it's there. Patterson may have more upside because, it's a favorable matchup for the Falcons too. What about you? You have a lean?
Yeah, I mean, with Cordell, the Jags are actually tough to run against. They're 3.6 yards per carry. You can pass against them. I imagine he's super involved. I just don't know if I want to even touch this Atlanta offense right now. If I did, you could go Patterson or Kyle Pitts. Patterson's probably been more consistent. Pitts has kind of been bad the last 4 weeks after those big 2 games, but I'd probably go Robinson too. Like, you look at the blowouts, but I think the key to me is they've had 33 backfield touches in those 2 games. Robinson's had 30 of them. So, like, even though he hasn't been super involved because of the blowouts against the Colts and the Niners, it's not like someone else is getting involved. Like, he's still the guy. And I like that in a game against Atlanta. 6,200 is a pretty good price for that. I think that I make that preference there. Dropping under 6, we have AJ Dillon at 5,900. Obviously, I'm going with the comment that, this is if Aaron Jones does not play. I don't think he's going to, but he looked pretty good at practice on Wednesday and Thursday, so maybe it might be in there. Obviously, I'd scratch him off if Jones played. I think there'd be enough of a timeshare that I don't get involved. You mentioned Darrell Henderson at 5,800. Eli Mitchell practiced Wednesday and Thursday. He's 5,400. What do you do in this 5,000 range at running back?
Okay, well, I play Dillon if Jones is out. Yeah. It kind of seems like Jones is going to play. At least listening to what LaFleur said. But yeah, it seemed like he would be out a little longer with the injury that he suffered.
They have a bye next week too, so I just kind of figured they would hold him out through the bye and be safe. But I mean, if you, I didn't see the quote from LaFleur, but yeah, I saw the clips of practice and he certainly looked good.
Yeah, so yeah, I guess it doesn't matter. But if he doesn't play, Dillon. I think Dillon basically had a floor game last week and still ended up with 15 points.
They just got down in that game. You mentioned earlier, they got down to Minnesota and they just kind of, but he still had, like you said, he had 17 touches. He had 6 catches. So that was huge in PPR.
And then Henderson, I like Henderson too. If Jones plays, then I won't roster Dillon, and I'll play Henderson in this range. It's a decent matchup against Green Bay, and it's a good price for Henderson, who we had seen in the mid 6s for the most part recently. Just one more guy I wanted to mention, maybe get your thoughts on. I could have some interest in Saquon this week. What do you think about that?
I would love to at the price, but man, he just looked terrible in the last game. I don't know how fully healthy he is, to be honest. He did not they were playing Tampa, right? He just didn't. Yeah. He looks, I mean, granted, it's tough to play against Tampa, but what was he, like 12 for 16 rushing? I mean, he's just, I don't know. I don't know I can get there. I'd probably play Eli Mitchell, assuming he's healthy, over Saquon this week. He's practicing so far this week. He had 27 carries last time he played. Minnesota's allowing 4.5 yards per carry. I think the Niners will want to attack them on the ground. The key for me is Minnesota's missing 3 stars on the defensive line too. Like it's a big spot that they're really banged up on their defensive line. I think that Shanahan's going to see that. And I think that when Mitchell plays, it's very clear that he's the guy in that backfield, which is important to me too. So I get Barkley, and like you see him at this price, and you're like, oh my God, it's Saquon Barkley. Like you got to do it, but I just don't love that offense. I don't love the way they're playing. I kind of like the Eagles defense enough that I'm okay not playing him. I'm not convinced how healthy he is or how much they're going to lean on him, I guess.
Yeah, no, you're probably right. He had a play in that Tampa game where the old Barkley would have definitely taken it to the house.
Yeah, it just doesn't look. He doesn't look anywhere near the same.
The reason I brought it up was I liked to see the 6 targets. The Giants are banged up at receiver, and they fired Jason Garrett. So maybe there's some new wrinkles in the offense this week, but yeah, the health definitely concerns me. I would definitely just go James Robinson over him, but you convinced me on Mitchell. Definitely. Assuming he's healthy. Yeah, that's really interesting about the Vikings D-line being so banged up and Mitchell's good salary. Yeah, I like that call.
So 2 other guys down here I wanted to mention to you. I'm curious of your thoughts on Javonte Williams. It's frustrating. Like he splits time with Melvin Gordon. Melvin Gordon has 7 touchdowns. Javonte has 2. But we talked all year about you can run on this Chargers defense. They've been a little bit better lately the last couple of games. I think they were like 5.3 yards per carry before their bye, 3.8 after. But he was 8 for 48 in week 10. He was 17 for 111 in week 9 before their bye. Javonte Williams is really good. It's just a matter of getting touches. At 5,200, is the price low enough where you're okay with playing him in a good matchup at maybe 60% of the backfield touches?
I don't know. No,
yeah, it's hard, right? Really. It's just tough. It's just, and they inside the 5, and it's almost always Melvin Gordon. It makes it tough, but God, if there's no Melvin Gordon, this would be like an absolute green light here. But it's tough.
Absolutely, like we want to roster Williams so bad, but you just can't with Gordon and I shouldn't say you can't. Of course you can. Gordon, you got to think he's going to see plenty of work going against his old team. I mean, it's too likely also that the Broncos get down in that game. So yeah, as much as I want to, I think we're going to have to wait another week at least.
Yeah, I think I agree. I really want to click it, but I just don't. I think it's more of me wanting to than anything. Lastly, in this range, Dontrell Hilliard on Tennessee is 4,600. Playing against New England, they are the biggest underdog on this slate at 6.5 points. Dontrell Hilliard had 10 targets last week. He had 8 catches, 47 yards. He had 7 rushes for 35 yards. It seems like there's going to be no Jeremy McNichols. I think that'd be a must to even consider this one. Hilliard played 51 snaps last week. Could be a nice game script if they get head down in New England. Maybe they dump it off to him a ton. Do you entertain this at all at 4,600 with Tennessee so banged up all over the place? They have no running backs. Even their receivers are banged up, and maybe dump offs become more interesting when there's no Julio Jones. There's no Marcus Johnson. He got hurt early last game. AJ Brown is questionable. He has a couple injuries. We don't know what's going to happen there. I think he's going to play, but is he 100%? Do you entertain this at all at 4,600?
Yeah. I think you'd have to. Again, McNichols needs to be out to entertain it. They cut Adrian Peterson, so he's not there anymore. So yeah, I think you have to because they have no receivers either. And 10 targets last week for 4,600 in a game when they should be behind. Yeah, I'd entertain it with no McNichols. I don't know. I guess I don't love it, but
it's a leap of faith. You're hoping that they use him the same way. Who knows what they're doing? But yes, you mentioned they don't have receivers. They don't have a tight end really. They use there's just not a lot here at the moment. I mean, Tennessee's a team that was streaking for a while and just so banged up right now that if he gets 10 targets, obviously he's the easiest play ever at 4,600. But even if he gets 6 like that, maybe works out. Maybe 10 carries. It's just. I don't know. It's tough against the New England defense is playing well. New England's playing really well right now. I'm back and forth on it. He's definitely in my mix, but I'm probably going to hope not to use him, I think.
Yeah. So Scott, would you rather play him or a Jets running back with Michael Carter out?
I would probably rather play Hilliard.
Yeah. So I'm thinking about, you see Michael Carter out and the Jets against Houston.
Do you go Ty Johnson? Do you go Tevin Coleman? Where do you even start with that, I guess?
So, yeah, that's the question. I mean, you never like to roster Tevin Coleman. And And
Ever.
Ty Johnson catches passes. So, I mean, Ty Johnson seems like a similar option to Hilliard. But yeah, it's a murky situation. I'd probably need a little clarification there.
I thought Ty Johnson at 4,300 would be a play, and then I looked and he had 2 touches last week, and I was just like, oh, that's just like the floor is the floor. Like, it's so low. Do you consider Miles Sanders at 5,100 off the good game last week, 16 for 94? But it seems clear to me that he's probably not getting 90% of the snaps. He's probably looking like 60% of the snaps. He played 36 snaps last week.
Right. Yeah. So I'd really like to. I don't like that he hasn't been involved in the passing game at all. Now
at all, you're right.
At all. Now they didn't really need to pass last week against the Saints. However, yeah, that snap share is concerning. I think he played 40% of the snaps last week. They seem intent on using other backs. If he was involved in the passing game, I'd be rostering him, but it just doesn't seem like you can count on that. Yeah, I don't know. Where do you fall on that?
I had a note on here, like I'd use him if he was more involved in the passing game. So I agree with you. It just he hasn't been involved there at all. So it's an easy range. I think I would try and get up to Eli Mitchell if I was in that range. I think I'd get up to 5,400. Even I get up to AJ Dillon. I get up to James Robinson. There's enough guys close enough that I'd probably rather play where I don't feel like I need to delve into that, kind of guessing on touches between him and Javonte Williams and Hilliard. I'd like to not have to play them, but they're cheap and I get it. So it depends on a build, but I think I'd try to get up to Mitchell if I'm in that range.
Yeah, me too.
So let's talk about some cheap wide receivers, or I guess mid-range wide receivers first. Mid-range wide receivers. Let's do like our 2 favorites in this range. We'll get a little clip here and see how we like them. Why don't you give me one? I'll go one. Then we'll go back and forth. But in this range, let's call it like 4,500 to 6,500. Who are you? Who's your favorite guy in this range? Who's your first favorite?
Okay, yeah. Well, there's a lot of guys in this range that I like. I think at the top of the 5K range, there's going to be a few guys that are popular. I'm going to highlight a guy in the middle that might not be quite as popular, and that's Jerry Judy. Now, part of the reason I like him is because he makes sense in Herbert stacks, and another reason I like him is because he seems fully healthy now. He saw 9 targets last week. He played his highest percentage of snaps of the season, 8 targets the week before. And Bridgewater hasn't really been targeting his outside receivers. And also the Chargers give up more over the middle to tight ends and slot receivers. So I'm going to take a chance on Judy as my run back in Chargers stacks. And I also think he's a good enough play that you could just play him on his own too. What about you, Scott? Who do you like in this range?
Yeah, I like that Judy call. That's an interesting one, especially with the tight end and slot receiver stat you had. My first one here is going to be Jalen Waddle at 5,900. I just think at under 6,000, you get someone who is insanely involved in the offense right now. I know it's not deep balls. I know his ADOT is low, but you look at the targets. 13, 8, 12, 10, 6, and 9. Last week he had a touchdown run too, which is huge. He was 8 for 65 on 9 targets. He has 60-plus yards in 5 of 6 games. The Carolina had been pretty good against receivers for a while, but Terry McLaurin had 100 yards against them last week. I just think you're going to be someone under 6,000 that's this involved in the offense. I just going to take it every time. It's 6, and he's a guy that is talented. It's not like we're talking about Danny Amendola or someone that like is only going to be underneath route. Like if Waddle can break a tackle and go, like he can be gone. We've seen that. We saw that plenty at Alabama. So I like Jalen Waddle at 5,900. I'm not stacking Miami, Carolina at all anyway, but as a one-off, I think he's very, very playable and someone I'm having a lot of lineups. Who else do you like in this range? Who's your second guy here that you're going to be targeting in this range?
Yeah, really like Waddle too. So I'll briefly mention 2 other guys because one is Marvin Jones, who I sort of already mentioned. It's a great spot for Jacksonville, and Agnew being out now sort of pushes it over the edge for me that I'd expect some more targets. And there's like a little bit of added touchdown equity in such a good matchup against the Falcons. And that the same can be said about Brandon Cooks. Normally, I don't love rostering Cooks playing for such a bad team. But with Tyrod Taylor back in in 4 Tyrod Taylor starts this season, he's seen 14 targets twice.
Yep.
I know he only had 3 last week, but that's because of the game script. Houston got up big early and, kind of didn't really need to throw the ball. And then, we normally don't think of Cooks as a guy with too much upside, just, being at the team that he plays for. But a home matchup against the Jets adds some touchdown upside. So I'm comfortable going with Cooks this week. What about you? Who else are you looking at in this range?
Yeah, my other guy in this range is I'm going to drop down a little bit. I'm going to go to 4,900, get a little spicy on you. I'm going to go Van Jefferson. We talked about him a little bit. We talked about Rams Packers stacks. He's 4,900 on DraftKings. I just think this is a little bit more than a back and forth game than the total tells us. I think that if you're playing a Packers stack, it's a really nice way to get cheap underneath there. You mentioned Odell Beckham. I know he's had 10 days to run the offense. I still don't think it's I'm not that worried about him, taking that many targets. But you look at Van Jefferson last 4 weeks, 7, 6, 7, and 7 targets. It's a nice cheap piece of this game. I think Stafford is due for a bounce back. He's playing a ton of snaps, which is really important. He's on the field all the time. And he's a guy that can't hit a big one too. So you give me consistent targets, a guy who's on the field all the time and can hit a big one. I do really like that. And I think that under 5,000 is a really good way to get a piece of this game really cheaply. So I'm going to be having a lot of Van Jefferson in lineups, both in stacks. And also I think if you're very playable as a one-off too, and just kind of get a piece of this game if you're going elsewhere with your stack. So I do like Van Jefferson a lot with the obviously no Robert Woods and Beckham. We're not totally sure if he knows the offense yet, but a couple other guys in this range. We talked about Michael Pittman earlier. The 2 guys I wanted to also highlight, Elijah Moore is 5,600 at Houston. He's been going off the last 3 games, been really good. He was 8 for 141 touchdown last game. Zach Wilson is back now. Does that make you less interested in Moore, more interested in Moore? I know he's got a cannon, but I don't think we have any clue how Zach Wilson is going to look in this offense. After we've seen, Mike White and Joe Flacco, not exciting, but they have been targeting Elijah Moore. The quarterback switch does worry me a little bit here.
Yeah, the quarterback switch worries me too. I would have had some interest in some of these Jets receivers, especially Moore. And I'm not saying, Wilson starting should eliminate that interest, but I think for me, it does, at least with Moore, just because there's so many options in that range. I mean, we just named a bunch of them and we didn't even name Michael Pittman until you just mentioned him.
Yeah.
We didn't even talk about Mike Williams except for a little bit at the start of the show. So yeah, I think just like there's a lot of opportunity cost in that range, and I probably don't want to roster a receiver that has Zach Wilson as their quarterback, like over some of those other guys. Like, what do you think?
Yeah, that's kind of where I got to. I really like Elijah Moore. I like the price, but I have no idea what the offense is going to look like with Wilson. I mean, it looked terrible with him earlier. I just don't know. I mean, I think they should play him. I mean, he needs to get reps, but I don't think I want to rely on it either. Last guy on this range I want to mention, because you mentioned him earlier, someone that was disappointing last week. T. Higgins is still in this range. He's 5,400. He was super quiet last week, 3 targets. It seems like, there's one of the Bengals receivers always kind of out of the mix each week. It's usually Higgins or it's Tyler Boyd. It's hard to figure out which one. T. Higgins hasn't scored since week 2, hasn't hit 100 yards this year, but he's talented. The targets have been there almost all year before last week. It was 15, 6, and 8 threes before last week. Played 59 snaps. He's on the field a lot. Do you go back to him? Or are you like, he's got to show me first? Where do you fall on Higgins?
Yeah, that one really hurt last week. Yeah, so it did.
That Cincy game just stung all over the place.
So yes, I would go back to him, I guess, is the answer to your question. I guess if I was more on the Bengals, but just in general, I like going back to popular guys who failed the week before. And, now he's not going to, everyone else feels the same as we do when you bring up T. Higgins. And it doesn't look like a great spot against Pittsburgh, but it's not a bad spot. I mean, we saw the Chargers just light them up last week. So I like going back to Higgins. Yeah, for the reasons I said, and because he's not going to be as popular as those other guys. Now, am I going to go back to him? Probably not, just because I'm not on that game. But I'm okay with it. I don't know. I guess that's the best answer I can give.
Yeah, I think that's kind of where I fall. I think that if I need someone in that range, I'm okay with it. But it's just it's been a rough road. No 100-yard game all year has been pretty wild, considering that he's got a good quarterback and all that. But what about real quick cheap receivers? You talked about Laviska Shenault a little bit at 4,400. Is there anybody in the under 4,500 range that you find yourself liking? There's two guys down here I do like, but I'll let you go first here.
Yeah. Okay. I don't know if there's guys in this range that I really like. But Scott, why don't you go first?
All right, fair enough. We talked about him a little bit last week. I really like Marquez, Valdez, Scantling again. He's 4,100 against the Rams. He finally hit the big game last week. He was 4 for 123 and a touchdown. He had that 75-yard touchdown, take the lead late in the game. Most important to me, I know he's a big play guy that can hit the big play, but he had 10 targets last week. He is the clear number 2 right now. He's above Allen Lazard. I like it even more if Aaron Jones doesn't play, because they use him a lot in the passing game too. I think he's just a nice cheap piece of this game. Always a boomer bust guy. You're always taking a risk with MVS that he catches 2 passes and doesn't do much. But give me a number 2 guy in an offense with a Hall of Fame quarterback in a game that I think is going to be a higher total than they were seeing on the Vegas line. 4,100. I just like the price. I think he's a guy that can blow up with that price. And you give me that down this range on a good offense with a great quarterback, I'm going to take that every time. The other guy down here is Nick Westbrook. They're against the Patriots. They're going to have to throw the ball a lot. We mentioned a lot earlier. We're talking about Dontrell Hilliard, that the Tennessee just has nobody healthy right now.
Yeah. That's who I was going to bring up, someone from the Tennessee game. He was 7 for 107 on 8 targets last week. He was really valuable at the price. AJB is questionable. Julio, Marcus Johnson are out. Good game script. I think for the price, he can get there pretty easily. Yeah, and so in this cheap range too, there is just no one. It's rough. Yeah, it's usually rough. I can find guys. I looked at Nico Collins again. I'm like, yeah, I looked closer, and I'm like, no, I can't get there. I think it's MVS and Westbrook for me. Maybe some Shenault if I let you talk me into him. But other than that, I think that those are the 2 guys that I like the most. Yeah, and Nico Collins was the other one that I was even considering bringing up. So other than that, there's just nothing. Now, I will take a few chances on Shenault, but like you, I'm wary, and I understand if you don't want to go there. But you asked about the even cheaper than him. Yeah, I think Westbrook's he'd have to be the best option after 7 catches for 107 yards last week and just all the injuries they have. I guess that's where I'd feel safest. In a game they should be trailing. Right. In a game they should be trailing. Yeah. Another good point. But yeah, I love the MVS call, especially if Lazard doesn't play. Definitely. So real quick, I want to talk tight ends, but finally a note from our sponsors at Thrive. Thrive is back for another season of fantasy football, and they're running huge guaranteed contests each week this NFL season. With Thrive Fantasy, you can eliminate the countless hours of research and focus on only the top-tier athletes that have the biggest impact on the game. Sign up today and get a free 6-month Roto subscription. To do that, you do these three easy steps. Visit rotowire.com/thrive. Deposit a minimum of $10 and receive a $100 deposit bonus up to $100. Play in your first paid contest. You'll then receive a free 6-month Rotowire subscription. So, Ryan, real quick on tight ends, we've kind of hit a bunch of them already. I know we got to jump out of here, but I think Rob Gronkowski sticks out gigantically to me at 4,400. I know you mentioned that maybe not as big as I think it is, but I do like that. I think Pat Freiermuth will be popular at 4,300 down here. Eric Ebron is out. Freiermuth's been very involved for Pittsburgh. 7-7, 6-9, and 7 targets the last 5 games. He doesn't do a lot. He's got a score to get you there, but he has 4 touchdowns the last 4 weeks, so he does get in the end zone, but hasn't topped 60 yards all year. So it's always makes me a little bit wary when you're focusing and needing a touchdown. I think Dallas Goedert at 4,800 in the same range is playable too. He had 8 targets last week. It's just a matter of whether Philly throws the ball enough to make him interesting. But when they do throw, he's obviously very, very involved with Zach Ertz out of town. Those are the 3 that stuck out to me in the cheaper ranges. What are you thinking at tight end this week? The 3 you mentioned are the 3 that stand out for me. Nice. Yep. Really like Gronk, really like Freiermuth, and I understand the Goddard play. Again, I just don't normally play Hurts and a pass catcher, but Goddard makes sense. Other guy. Oh, good. Yeah, just one other guy, and I briefly mentioned him. It's a guy that put up a big donut last week, and that's Dan Arnold. Yep. That was really surprising. No targets. It was shocking. It's very surprising. Yeah. And then, like I've already said about Jacksonville, it's just a good spot. And Agnew being out should add a target or two to Arnold as well. So I'd be comfortable going there. I guess, looking cheaper, I didn't see much. I mean, like you can roster Jared Cook for 3,000, but again, like I get if you don't want to, especially because they seem to bring in Parham around the goal line. So Cook doesn't seem to have that much touchdown equity anymore, unless of course, he catches 20-yarder, 30-yarder or something. But yeah, I don't know. Are there any cheaper tight ends you're looking at?
Not really. I think Tyler Conklin is mildly playable at 3,700, but I think I'd find the money to get back up to Gronk or to Dan Arnold. And I didn't see a lot of, I didn't see much at punt tight end this week. Cook's probably the guy, but I'd even almost rather play Parham at 2,700. At that point, I don't want to try and pick the tight ends that score a touchdown. Last question on tight ends, real quick. Are we past playing Kyle Pitts at 6,100? Where do you fall in this? It's been rough the last 2 weeks. The Atlanta offense has just been brutal. There's no way, and he's gotten sucked into the fact that they've been sucking. So he had 100 yards in back-to-back games. He's not topped 65 yards since. I'm a little surprised the price hasn't come down more, I guess is kind of my point.
Yeah, same. It's the salary. It's the salary that's keeping me off. I'm not off Pitts, and it's a good matchup, and we know what kind of ceiling he has. But yeah, I don't like that salary. So I don't know if I'm going to get to Pitts this week, but I understand it. Again, if there's just one, I guess one. If the Giants are missing Kadarius Toney and Shepard, who both haven't practiced this week, if both those guys are out, give me some Evan Ingram. I'll take a chance then. But yeah, other than that, this range is tough.
Yeah, I'm pretty much in the never Evan Ingram range. I get it. Every time I'm like, he's so talented, he's so athletic, but then you look and I don't think he's top 55 yards all year. He has one touch. I guess he has 2 touchdowns in 2 last 3 games. So I guess they used him down in the red zone. I get it. I just, I don't know.
Right. It's only if those, if those slot receivers who see a ton of targets are out. Because then you just figure he's got to see targets.
Yeah, that's a fair point on the injuries there. And real quick, let's talk defenses. I think this is going to be a week that everybody is going to look at these cheap defenses. We have Houston, which seems crazy to say out loud, 2,300, but facing the Jets, facing Zach Wilson. Houston actually has 6 sacks the last 2 weeks. So they've actually been playing well. They forced 5 turnovers each of the last 2 games. It's wild when you look at these stats. The Texans we just think of them as so bad, but they forced 10 turnovers the last 2 weeks in their games. The Jets offensive line has been a little bit better lately, but still a lot of turnovers. It's Zach Wilson. And then we have Jacksonville against Atlanta, 2,200, 10 sacks the last 4 weeks. Atlanta's defense has been horrible. They've allowed 11 sacks the last 4 weeks. Are you kind of jumping into these uber cheap defenses this week? Or are you thinking of pushing up a little bit to get to better actual defenses?
Yeah. So as someone who almost always plays cheap defenses anyway,
you must be loving this week though.
I can't pass this up. I mean, a home defense against Zach Wilson for 2,300. Yeah. So for cash games, you just play the Texans defense and forget about it. Now I like the Jags defense too. So yeah, I could take a chance there. I've seen even a few people mention the Falcons defense in that same matchup. I don't love that as much, but just in general, for tournaments with so much rostership concentrated on these bottom defenses, you can get a little leverage rostering some other ones. So yeah, if you like some of the more expensive defenses for tournaments, by all means go for that, because if one of those defenses, puts up 20 and one will, that's a good way to win a tournament when everyone's cheap defense scores 5 points.
Yeah.
Is there anyone you like, I guess? Is there anyone you like, or who do you like most other than those cheap ones?
I think it's a really good point, because I think everybody, I don't want to say everybody, but so many people are just going to click Houston or Jacksonville and just kind of move on, especially in a tournament, you're like, oh, I can get $1,000 more to get this guy to this guy. And the defense is always the place that people do that. Always the place, I need 600. I'll just change my defense. So I think you do get a lot of leverage there on the defenses. The two that I like, I like the Eagles a little bit, but they scored 3 the last 4 weeks, which is crazy. But mostly just going against the Giants. The Giants have allowed multiple sacks in 5 straight weeks, so I just think that's a good spot. The Eagles are 3,200 on DraftKings. I think that is workable. I also really like Carolina. They're 3,100 at Miami. The Panthers have multiple sacks in 5 straight weeks. The Miami offensive line was good last week, but 8 sacks the 2 weeks prior. So I think there's some possibility for a big play in those 2 games. And if I'm going for a little bit more expensive and off the cheaper obvious ones, I want a team that can make some big plays. I think that for me, that's Philly and Carolina. Where you're not getting too expensive, you're not getting up to Patriots 3,900, Eagles are 3,200, Panthers are 3,100. I think those are the 2 teams I like if I'm getting away from the 2 cheap defenses.
Yeah, I like both those.
Yeah, so I think it's a week to do it too. I think I'm going to play in my main tournament lineups. I'm going to try and play Carolina or Philly, and maybe try and avoid the, when you get obvious. I mean, the problem is if Zach Wilson does a pick 6, like, you're just screwed at that point. Like, you miss that, and the whole field gets it. But on defense, with so much is variable, if I can get away from a super high percentage win in a tournament, I think I'm going to do it.
Yep, it's a good call.
Thanks for everybody for listening to the Rotowire Fantasy Football Podcast, the Friday DFS version, sponsored by WynnBET. We really appreciate that. If you could please rate and review the podcast, we appreciate that. Also, if you want to follow Ryan, he is at Ryan Belongia. That's Belongia. I know it doesn't sound like it spells, but that's how it's spelled. I am Scott Jenstad, Jenstad on my last name. If you want to hit us up there as kind of injuries break and we get some more news over the weekend, please do. Happy to answer any questions. Other than that, I hope you guys have a really good week 12. We're back at you in week 13 next Friday. So take care and have a fantastic week.
Thanks, Scott.